Hey there! We'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us spread the word and connect with more amazing people like you.
Welcome to We Be Parents, where parent doctors Matthew Lederman and Alona Pulde explore current parenting topics, share stories, and help bring families closer together.
Welcome to We Be Parents, where we explore the joys and challenges of parenting and help families grow closer together. Hi, I'm Dr. Alona Pulde.
And hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Lederman.
In our last episode, we talked about what happens when we as parents become so wrapped up in our child's activities that we lose sight of our own identity. Today, we're taking that conversation even deeper, sharing real stories from parents who've experienced this firsthand and answering some questions from our listeners.
But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. We tackle real everyday parenting struggles every week, and we'd love you to be part of the We Be community. By subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and trust us, you'll want to be here for the next one.
I'd love to start by just summarizing what we talked about in the last episode. Specifically, how easy it is to slip from supportive parent to over-identified parent. And I have been there. I shared how my own love for musical theater exposed the girls to musical theater. But beyond that, my desire to almost live vicariously through them, if I'm going to own that authentically and vulnerably, more than encourage them to go. Really kind of put that as an option against options that I knew would not excite them. Now they're finding their own love of it and for it and passion to continue, but there definitely was enmeshment there for a good portion of the beginning of that discovery.
And just to clarify, enmeshment is what we're calling that over-identifying with the child or being sort of tangled or blended with them versus that healthy differentiation where you have your own identity and they have theirs. And there can be some support and connection and encouragement, but not living through them. And I think some people live through their children when their children are doing things they couldn't do, or their children are doing things now that the parents would love to be doing, but feel as if they can't. So it's always coming from good intentions, or often it's coming from good intentions. Yes. They think the children are going to succeed better if they go to this better school. So they're pushing that. So it's always trying to meet a need, but sometimes it has, or often can have, some unhealthy impact or consequences.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that comes also from how we have been taught to identify ourselves, and then how we think that that's the only way our children can identify themselves. Like, my parents immigrated to this country, and they did not have all the opportunities that were afforded to me living here in America. So for my father, it was really important that our education is front and center and super prioritized. And he definitely encouraged us to be those straight A students and to pursue the careers of status, being a lawyer, being a doctor, being, an artist or a theater actress was just not on the table. That's not going to work. And so there was a part of me when we had the girls that had that so ingrained, that type A personality, but they need to be academically inclined, and I want them to academically strive. That's the only way, versus there are a lot of other ways. And if I step away and let them experience their own journey to some degree and let them find their own passions and their own path with guidance, right? They're not left alone to just figure it out, but with some guidance, but without an attachment to what that outcome needs to be.
Yeah, it makes sense. Your dad, if I remember correctly, was on the trajectory for those careers, but due to some life circumstances, that was taken away from him,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't want to have that happen to you.
Yes.
So sometimes it comes from a fear place where they just are trying to protect the child, but it still has an impact and a consequence.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great point. And you made it before. I think it always comes from good intentions. We love our kids. We want them to succeed. We want them to thrive. But sometimes the way we want them to thrive is through our own eyes, and we're not seeing it through theirs.
Yeah.
And that was the tool that we introduced, which was the AAA approach: awareness, adjustments, and anchors, as a way to step back and reclaim our own identity while still being supportive and engaged parents. Today, we're going to share some real life stories of parents navigating this struggle, some successes, some challenges, and ways to break free from that enmeshment trap.
Now, do we want to give listeners a little summary of the AAA approach, or do we want to make them go back and listen to?
Do you want to give them just a quick summary of what that is?
I don't do anything quickly. From a high level, though, awareness, recognizing when you're too enmeshed, and then there's signs. We get talk about signs for that. There's adjusting and shifting of sort of how you show up and how you think of yourself and how you relate. And then there's the anchors of personal for yourself and how, making sure you create your own identity, and anchors, relationship anchors around with friends and partners that don't have anything to do with your children, and then the future anchors where you make sure that your future can be very full and robust, even if it has nothing to do with your children. So that awareness, sort of shifting and the adjustments of shifting, and then anchors that really keep you solidly attached to joy that is independent from your children.
Oh, I thought you did a very nice job summarizing.
All right, go me. I tend to always add more instead of less, so that was good.
All right, so let's share our first success story, which is about Lisa, who had been a competitive dance mom for years. Every costume, every rehearsal, every routine, she was all in. But when her daughter went to college and stopped dancing competitively, Lisa didn't know what to do with herself. After months of feeling lost, she decided to revisit an old passion, photography. She started taking classes, rediscovered her creative side, and even launched a small business. Now, instead of just capturing her daughter's performances, she's finding joy in her own artistry and journey. And I love that story. What I love about it is that it highlights, one, it's never too late. And even if you have been lost in your children's identity, that's not a permanent thing.
Yeah, she found a way to redirect her energy into something that really fulfilled her.
Yeah. And for Lisa, it was something that she reacquainted herself with. But even for people who are starting from scratch, kind of, what do I like? What don't I like? Is the excitement of dabbling and exploring, and the so many opportunities that are available, and you just kind of have to pick. But if we have that expansive mind frame, thinking, okay, this is my opportunity to play in the sandbox and see what I like, versus the panic of, oh, what do I do now that I have to deal with myself, is a very different approach.
And that's exactly what we mean by building personal anchors.
Mm-hmm.
So great. I love that story. And then here's another one about Mark, who has always been the football dad. Every Friday night he was on the sidelines. Every game day felt like a personal mission. When his son decided not to play in college, Mark felt crushed, almost like he had lost his purpose. And after reflecting, he realized that this relationship with his son had become too centered on football. So he made an effort to reconnect in new ways, going on weekend hikes, playing chess, and talking about things beyond sports. So the relationship deepened as a result, and Mark found fulfillment in simply being a dad rather than a coach or cheerleader. And this is such a great example of how we can redefine our relationships with our kids beyond their activities. And sometimes it just takes a shift in focus to realize that parenting isn't about what they do, it's about who they are. And to me, looking at this instead of through a critical lens of, oh, I'm enmeshed with my child and I have to stop doing this. Instead, think about all the different ways that you're going to get to learn how to connect with your child and connect not only and connect with yourself around what brings you joy. And then you can still, it's not like you can't talk to your child. We're not saying you have to stop, but shift it to a healthy, differentiated type of connection versus an enmeshed connection.
I like this story so much as well. Just seeing all the different opportunities that he found to connect to his son, and then how enriching that ended up being. Here's one that is a challenge story, and this is the pressures on a child. A father of a high school star student shared this. I just realized how much pressure I've been putting on my son. He told me last week that he feels like if he failed, he's letting me down. I never meant to make him feel that way, but I think I've been living through his success more than I realized. I love the self-awareness of this father and the vulnerability to share the pressure that he has put on his son, as well as the accountability that he's living through the successes more than he realized. And I think that happens a lot with parents, especially when their children are shining in their pursuits. So you have the star soccer student and the proud parents of that MVP, or the gifted A students heading to an Ivy League, and what that means for your own status. The danger is, and what I love, even though this is a challenge story, I think there's a huge success in the father's ability to be accountable and aware. That's the beginning of our tool, right? Is the awareness of his enmeshment with his child.
I like that. And it's interesting. I, if anything, went to the other extreme of not, again, because everything we're talking about is balance. I went to the extreme of not putting any type of pressure. And I think that can be harmful as well as much as putting too much pressure. Because I grew up, and for me, there was a lot of emphasis on getting good grades and doing well in school. And not only was it said to us that grades are important, but I got a lot of positive reinforcement when I come home with good grades, or I was celebrated as one of the smart children, or I was just acknowledged and got more attention from my parents when I did well in school. So for many reasons, it was quote unquote pushed on me, both directly and indirectly. And at a certain point in my life, I realized that that's not what makes me happy. Even though it took me well into college to pick my head up and say, "Wait a second, why am I doing this? What need is this meeting of mine?" I was just getting good grades because I got reinforced. That's what I thought I would do, or what I was supposed to do. So now with my kids, I tried to not put any pressure on them around. And thank God they had you, or I don't know if they'd still be in grade school. They might be out of school altogether. But the idea is to find that balance. And my wounding resulted in me showing up in a certain way. And there's so many different ways we can show up as parents as a result of our wounding. The key is not to try and suppress that exists, but to own it and then acknowledge it and then try to grow from it.
And it's hard because you happen to have the awareness, but how often do we not have that awareness? we're almost running on a default energy. So I think knowing that this challenge exists and knowing that as parents, it's easy to get caught up in our children's lives and allow that to define who we are, is really important. So if you've been listening to us for a while, we get a lot of questions about what to do in tricky parenting or relationship moments.
Yeah, and if I'm being real, I'm asking Alona those same questions all the time. I get into those same tricky moments as everybody else does. And as much as we wish we could be there for each other in those exact moments, we just can't always be.
Yeah, that's why we partnered with the amazing team at Connected to create something we truly believe in, an AI coach called Amari. And we didn't just lend our names, we helped build it and train it and brought in everything we've learned about emotional healing, connection, and communication.
Yeah, we spent years training and learning, and we've created Amari, who is so calm and grounded, listens deeply and responds with warmth, clarity, and compassion. There's no judgment, no reactivity. In fact, we tasked our children with trying to get Amari reactive, and they still haven't succeeded. It's just steady support when you need it most.
We use it ourselves all the time, especially when we feel stuck or overwhelmed. And Amari's really helped us pause, reflect, given us insight that helps us come back to each other.
Yeah, we designed Amari to help you strengthen the relationships that matter most, starting with the one you have with yourself.
And we are so excited that you can try it now at webeparents.com and click on We Be Connected with a K to sign up. And when you have your Amari moment, please let us know, as we'd love to hear about it. So let's jump into letters from our listeners.
This is where we get letters with question or emails. We call them letters, but I don't think we get actual post mail, do we? The emails with questions around people dealing with parenting topics that fall into this category. We'd like to read them. One of the letters is about a parent with their son. And it says, "My son is thinking about quitting basketball, and I'm having a hard time accepting it. I know it's his decision, but I love the community, the games, and the identity we've built around it. How do I support him without feeling like I'm losing something too?"
I love this question because it extends beyond just the child and their pursuit to the greater benefit that comes from that, as far as reinforcing your commitments to that activity. The community, the friends that you make, the events, the social aspect of it, that suddenly feels like a real void if that goes away. And that's particularly important because even in those communities, that's the topic of conversation. It's your children and their basketball, or your children and their acting, or your children and their dance. And so even the thought of then meeting up with these parents when your child is no longer involved in that activity seems not realistic. What are you going to have to talk about?
Yeah, so if the conversation with your friends that are from the sports are about the sports, or if it's in school and you're just talking about academics, there's a lack of richness and real fertilizer for a more robust and broader connection to take hold.
That's especially when you are enmeshed and lack the personal awareness to begin with, how easy and alluring that is.
Yeah, exactly. So I would respond by saying, one, acknowledge your own feelings. This is a loss. It's okay to grieve it. And I think we talked about that before too, where you mourning the needs of yours that are no longer being met. And some of those, in my opinion, are you're meeting them in very healthy ways. And other times it's an opportunity to look at some wounding. So if your identity, again, is connected to your child's accomplishments, it's coming from a wounded place. And we can talk about that, and you can sort of grow from that. You can even get help from friends around that, or a professional therapist. But your identity really should ideally tie into you and not be dependent. Your worth is not dependent upon anything external. It's there because it's in you. And mourning, though, that there's some excitement and some accomplishment and some fun and joy that happens in those activities.
I like that you make that point because it's important. The question was, how do I support him without feeling like I'm losing something too? You can't. You can support him and acknowledge that you are losing something too. But then what do you do with that?
Right. And then shift your focus from the activity to the relationship. So what you care most about is the relationship and the connection with the child. And if you're connecting with the child, then you want to identify and connect to what needs of the child are being met by this decision. And this desire to change is clearly meeting needs. Let's connect to what those are. And the idea of staying with the old way of doing things is no longer working, meaning it's no longer meeting needs, or there's new needs that need to be met that can't be met from that old way of doing things. Mm-hmm. So connecting around that is really wonderful. It provides a richness to the relationship. And if you love the community, consider staying involved in a different role. So there's different ways to meet the needs, even though the way you've been doing it is through your child showing up in that way. Maybe you can show up in a different way and still stay connected to that community.
Yeah. And that's hard to do if you're embarrassed or ashamed of the fact that your child pulled out versus, oh, my child is moving on to new pastures and exploring different things, but I'd love to continue to hang out with these people that I enjoy or support their kids or whatever that might look like.
Yeah, volunteer, show up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're hiding and embarrassed that your child is switching or what they're doing, then that's something to look at before showing up. But ideally, you're showing up in this community, even though your child's not there, and saying, I'm so excited for my child. They're doing X, Y, and Z because it's meeting these needs.
Yes. I like this one too because the focus is a little bit different. It was my husband and I have built our entire marriage around our kids' activities. Now that they're getting older, I'm realizing we don't have much else holding us together. How do we reconnect?
We see that a lot with our clients.
Absolutely. All the time. And, we've talked about it as well that we have a pulse on it. So I think a particular sensitivity to where that is happening. And I think we've shared it in recent episodes. Kylie, our oldest daughter, was going through some health stuff that was requiring more attention. And that attention was pulling us to care for her, which was very important. But also noticing, hey, wait a minute. We feel like there's slowly distance is creeping as we're really prioritizing the kids and not prioritizing our own relationship. So we're taking regular inventory and we maybe catch it sooner, but I think it's something that can seed into any relationship, and I think it seeds into a lot of relationships. We don't even notice it until we feel like, oh, now what do I do? Or is it too late?
And that's where the anchors are helpful, because basically what you're saying is that when we were shifting our energy towards care for Kylie, our personal anchor and our relational anchor was starting to loosen up a little bit.
Oh, totally took a back seat. Yes.
So being aware of your personal anchor and your relationship anchor is essential for relationships to thrive. And ultimately, for Kylie's well-being, our tending to our personal and relationship anchors is essential as well.
Oh, that's so poignant because as you were saying that, I was remembering and wanting to share how at one point I remember her looking at me and saying, I really appreciate you caring for me, but it feels like I'm such a burden. Like, you guys are doing so much. And I realized at that moment the pressure that she was feeling by all the doting that was kind of happening on her. And it was a reality check for me to take a step back. So the impact is, we think we're doing all these great things and we think we're prioritizing the children and somehow that's benefiting them. And I think to some degree, having that balance, yes, paying attention to your children and supporting them, very, very important. Making them the only priority, damaging not only to you and your relationship, but to them as well.
For sure.
So I love the anchors, reminding parents to start by finding out what excites you. What are you doing? What are things that you can pursue on your own? And what are things that you guys can pursue as a couple that you would enjoy outside of parenting?
It's all about improv again. You got to come back to
You got to come back.
Everything
to
comes back to improv.
If only everyone did improv, life would be wonderful.
I was telling our improv teacher that I think we should start prescribing improv classes for families. It works a different part of the brain, and it really is a fun way to show up and be silly as a family together. And when I'm doing that, I'm not thinking about Kylie's health. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking critically of myself. It's just this joyous time that we all are together and we're all laughing with each other.
Yes.
So I think it's an important, find your improv, whatever that is for you, basically.
Is it pickleball? Is it, going to the beach together and playing beach volleyball? Whatever that looks like.
But something together where you're all having fun together.
Yes, finding time to play together and finding time to play outside of the parenting role, not involving your kids. So also having partners find that time to engage in that play and that fun together.
Exactly. And if you can't identify that time, then that's the first place to put your energy, which I think, how do we reconnect? It's doing an inventory of where you're putting all of your resources, where are you putting all of your energy? And if it's not balanced, and balance doesn't mean equal. Like we said, Kylie might need more support sometimes. So it won't be equal, but there's definitely some resources going towards myself, yours going towards yourself, and then going towards our relationship.
I think that's a final point in this particular situation that I want to point out is, yes, doing things as a couple is really important and finding those activities, but finding your own activities and bringing that to the couple is also really enriching. And we mentioned that in the last episode, that notion of differentiation actually bringing us closer. So as you're engaging in improv and I'm engaging in other things, and we bring that into our relationship, that personal joy that we're experiencing is something that our partners can celebrate. You feel that. And I think that really enriches and enhances a relationship as well. And sometimes it's easier to begin that way, to even find your own anchor versus trying to find the couple anchor. So,
because you can even find your own anchors. And when you're spending time together, you're talking about your own personal anchors.
yes.
So at least you're doing that. And then through that, maybe something will flesh out. But at least you're talking about what brings you joy that doesn't have anything to do with the kids.
Yes. I love that. I love that. So what are we leaving our audience today with?
Tell them the one last thing, Alona.
So the one last thing for today, I would say your child's life is their journey and your life is yours. When we remember that, we give both ourselves and our kids the freedom to grow.
Perfect. So you can take that to the bank. So great. Well, if today's episode resonated with you, leave us a rating and a review, please. And it helps us reach more parents. And if you have a story about reclaiming your identity as a parent or any other questions or stories that you want to share, please email us at parents@webetogether.com. We'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.